It's a quiet evening in the posh neighborhood of Broadmoor Bluffs, nestled high in the hills above Colorado Springs.
It was a new development. It's a high-end neighborhood, pretty houses, and it's got an incredible view of the city.
But in this community where everything seems perfect, trouble is about to boil over. No! 15-year-old Nikki Johnson is running for her life.
Somebody help! Please!
Nikki runs, streaking to the neighbors and pounding on the door.
Call 911! I need you to call 911!
Call 911. He's trying to kill my mom. He's trying to kill my mom.
Just calm down. Just calm down.
At approximately 6 p.m., responding officers arrive at Nikki Johnson's residence.
The initial officer located the victim in the living room with visible injuries to the forehead, the face, and the thigh. They cleared the house and determined that nobody else was in the house.
EMTs are called in. They attempt to save the victim.
I'm not getting anything.
I'm not either.
But it's too late.
We're gonna call it at 1807.
Thanks, guys.
Lt.Joe Kenda is stopping for a bite on the way back from court.
How you doing? I'll have whatever the number 1 is.
If I didn't have to eat, I wouldn't. It just doesn't mean anything to me. Whatever it is, order me a number 1. There's always a number 1.
Thank you.
So whatever shows up is what I would eat.
241. Go for Kenda.
I have a number 1 with a regular drink. That'll be $3.59.
Go ahead, keep it.
Thanks so much.
What was that address?
When they said the address, I knew it was Broadmoor Bluffs. I can count the times on one hand I have been in the Broadmoor area on violent crime.
10-4, I'll be right there.
This is the most expensive part of the city of Colorado Springs. It's unusual to have a violent crime in this kind of a neighborhood.
When Kenda arrives, concerned neighbors are already crowding the police barricade.
Because of the area in which it is, everybody is wound up like a $2 watch to see what's happening.
So what we got?
We responded to a possible home invasion. When we arrived, the suspect was gone and the victim was deceased. It's the homeowner, Sandra Lee Johnson.
41-year-old Sandra Johnson leaves behind 2 daughters, 23-year-old Kim and 15-year-old Nikki, the girl who initially reported the attack.
She was a successful businesswoman. She had an interior design business that kind of specialized in kitchens.
Who called it in?
The victim's daughter, Nikki.
Where's she at?
She's behind you.
She's being comforted by the neighbor. She's really, really upset.
Kenda needs to find out if Nikki can ID the man who attacked her mother, but her emotional state poses a problem.
There is a necessity at times to pressure people who are emotional. But I'm not a monster, and I'm not going to force a 15-year-old daughter that just lost her mother to talk to me when I can speak to her later and I have other things I can do.
All right, thank you. Let's go take a look at the body.
The victim was found in the living room on the carpet. There was blood pooled around her body. There was blood that was streaking across her face.
A .22 caliber revolver lies nearby, most likely the murder weapon.
There is a coffee table with 2 broken legs, and jelly beans are scattered all over the floor. I believe this happened very quickly.
Just 3 bullet wounds?
Yeah, as far as we can tell, we haven't moved her yet, though.
I can see 2 gunshot wounds in her face, one in the forehead and one just below one eye. I see a 3rd wound in her right thigh. The first shot that's fired is almost always low. Then the gun comes up level, and the shooter takes aim and puts 2 in her face 3 inches apart.
The victim's wounds tell Kenda he's dealing with no ordinary killer.
Whoever I'm looking for is familiar with guns. And if he's familiar enough to put 2 rounds 3 inches apart from distance, he's an excellent shot. So you count the bullets. This is a 6-round capacity weapon. We have 3 in our victim, but we have 4 expended casings. Now we have the question of the missing bullet. Where did number 4 go?
I just got another slug around here somewhere. Let's spread out and find it.
57 Roger, we'll show you in map 2, the rear.
We find nothing. We don't find number 4.
The missing bullet remains a mystery. Kenda's thoughts turn to motive.
Let's grab a couple officers, search the rest of the house, see if there's any signs of burglary.
Okay.
The Broadmoor Bluffs neighborhood's a very nice neighborhood. Burglars and thieves don't go to the poor neighborhoods to steal.
Kenda's men search the house for signs of a break-in, but come up empty.
Nothing is disturbed. Her purse is parked on the kitchen counter. No ransacking. There is no robbery here. This is very personal. Whoever did this only wanted one thing. They wanted Sandra Johnson dead.
Detectives need to figure out if Sandra had any skeletons in her closet, and Kenda knows just the place to look.
People who live alone, particularly women, keep a lot of personal items in their bedrooms. It's an excellent place to go to see if there are love letters. Are there things that might show us something about what she's been up to lately?
Hey, Lieutenant. Found a couple guns.
We find in the nightstand, directly next to the bed, 2 handguns. Both are fully loaded.
Handguns are very common in Colorado. This is the West, and most homeowners have handguns.
Go ahead and check that one. It hasn't been fired.
This one either.
It's not the presence of weapons that interests Kenda. Rather, it's the number of them.
Over my career, I've had many people threaten to kill me, my wife, my kids, my dog. I kept guns all over my house in the event that I needed one. I never kept more than 1 next to the bed. The safeties are off, rounds are chambered. These things are ready to use. That struck me as odd. Who is she afraid of? Because she's afraid of somebody.
It isn't long before Kenda finds a possible answer to that question.
Bingo.
An answering machine can be a treasure trove of secrets.
Then we hear a man's voice, really threatening, and says, "You little bitch, you're not going to do this to me." This equals 2 guns in a drawer in the master bedroom. Whoever that is why those guns are there. Ooh, now Who might you be? I'm investigating the shooting of Sandra Johnson, and it's apparent to me that there's somebody in her life that she was terrified of. We find 2 loaded handguns and messages on a phone filled with hate and poison.
It seems the caller wasn't content to leave just one threatening message.
She had a lot of them, and they went on a long, long time, and they alternated between being very threatening, clearly drunk, and then others were, making romantic plans.
But honey, I love you. Maybe we could get back together. And it's this bizarre bounce back and forth. I hate you, I'm gonna kill you. I love you, I want to be with you. What does that tell you about the personality of this individual? He is volatile.
I think we get the picture.
So what do you think? Stalker? Ex?
Well, it's definitely an ex of some sort. Let's concentrate on the paperwork. Letters, anything with men's names on them. This guy's got to be in here somewhere.
Hey, Lieutenant. Looks like we got some paperwork.
Kenda discovers that his victim is newly single.
The divorce was finalized 3 months ago.
Sandra's ex-husband is a man named Dale Johnson. Could the menacing voice on Sandra's answering machine be his?
After a divorce, it's not unheard of that the wife suddenly has a terrible accident or is suddenly burglarized and killed.
The divorce decree suggests the motive could be financial.
He has to pay her $2,000 a month in maintenance. Now that, in my head, is 2,000 reasons to kill her.
Did Dale Johnson murder his ex-wife to avoid paying alimony? While Kenda's men continue their search for the missing 4th bullet,
Keep looking around, see if you find anything else.
Kenda sets out to learn more about Sandra and Dale's relationship.
We immediately start contacting neighbors to see what they know about Sandra.
It isn't long before detectives find Janet Stone, a friend of Sandra's who lives nearby.
Sandra was super sweet. I just don't really see why anyone would do anything like this to her.
Sandra Johnson was described by people that knew her as being hardworking, easy to get along with, trustworthy, and a good person to have as a friend.
She's known her a very long time, knows all about the divorce. We say, was this ugly? Did they argue? Did they threaten each other? Was it that sort of thing?
It was pretty easy as divorce goes.
No fighting.
They were really mature about it. They didn't really have any problems at all.
There's just no possibility in her mind that Dale could be responsible for this. She said, he's just not that kind of person.
With Dale Johnson sounding less and less like a suspect, Kenda wonders if the man on the answering machine is a different, more recent suitor.
Was Sandra seeing anyone else since the separation?
Oh yeah, she had this really crazy boyfriend. I mean, he was really creepy.
Crazy boyfriend, did you say? Oh, I like crazy boyfriends.
According to Janet, after Sandra and Dale split, she met 41-year-old Robert Ambos, who runs a small landscaping business.
He, too, is divorced. She also says he has an extensive collection of guns. Initially, everything's fine. They get along well, they date, things are moving along pretty well. When they were alone, Bob and Sandra, Bob was happy.
Oh my gosh, hi! Oh my God! Great, how are you doing? Bob, this is Kim. Hi, Bob. So long.
He was jealous of her spending time with anyone else. He wanted exclusive control of her attention and her time.
How long's it been?
It's
Years.
been forever.
Oh my gosh. How's your daughter?
They'd been seeing each other, like, off and on. She had wanted to break up with him several times, but every time she wanted to, he threatened to hurt her.
There was an attraction there. I don't completely understand it, but she had feelings for him, even though she knew they didn't get along and that there was problems with their relationship.
She just finally broke it off a couple weeks ago. She couldn't take it anymore.
She had told you about these threats?
Yeah, he had been calling her a lot and leaving nasty messages and just really driving her crazy.
We're looking for an individual who is emotional, who makes threats, who's a very qualified user of a weapon, and Bob is all of those things.
Back at the crime scene, detectives find no trace of the missing fourth bullet. Kenda focuses his attention on his new suspect.
75 Charlie to records. I get a warrant and background check on Bob Ambos.
We find a cruelty to animals complaint. That's interesting. Let's find out about that.
Come on in, fellas. You guys want a beer?
Yes, but no thanks. Now, why we're here is we're trying to get a little background information on a neighbor of yours, Bob Ambos.
How can I help you get Bob out of this neighborhood?
And why would you say that?
He was a creep. He was kind of notorious in his neighborhood as being a bit of a nut job.
The neighbor tells Kenda about a complaint he recently filed against Bob.
Bob has a fish pond in his backyard containing goldfish. There's a hailstorm and it kills the fish, but Bob doesn't believe that. He believes the neighbor's cat has killed these fish.
The neighbor claims a few days later, his cat went missing.
The neighbor is out searching the neighborhood for his cat. He sees a blood trail going into the garage door of Bob's house. So he goes over to that door and he lifts the door up. Obviously, Bob has shot the animal on his property and dragged it inside. What a pleasant man.
Cruelty to animals sometimes can be an indicator that a person might be a sociopath, capable of murdering somebody.
There is a history of people who progress from hurting animals to hurting family, to hurting perfect strangers.
To Kenda, Bob Ambos certainly sounds capable of murder, but is he the man behind Sandra's murder? While en route to the police station, Kenda catches something on the police radio.
An ambulance has been dispatched to an address. And whose address is it going to? It's going to Bob Ambos's house.
The 911 call came in as a shooting. Could Bob Ambos be involved in a second homicide?
10-4, Kenda out.
We need to find out what the hell is happening with our man, Bob. At this point, I'm convinced that Sandra Johnson was murdered by her possessive ex-boyfriend, Robert Ambos.
Emergency dispatchers have reported a shooting at Robert Ambos's residence less than 24 hours after Sandra was killed.
Looks like we're heading to the hospital.
Kenda is convinced the two incidents are related.
Dr. Peter, how are you locating?
We're with the Colorado Springs Police Department. Did you have a shooting victim come in earlier?
Yes, we did.
Do they know who it is?
Just a second. Yes, Bob Ambos.
I don't think it's a coincidence that an ambulance has been sent to his home.
Kenda has a hunch who shot Bob Ambos and goes in to speak with the neurosurgeon.
Doctor.
Hey, Joe.
How you doing?
How's it going?
Good.
Is this your guy?
Afraid so. What can you tell me about his wounds?
I know this neurosurgeon rather well, and I said, what do you think about this?
Gunshot wound to the right frontal lobe. Entrance wound over here, ended up right here anterior.
There's a bullet lodged in the upper right frontal lobe of his brain.
How about the angle?
You know, the angle would suggest maybe even self-inflicted.
In my opinion, Bob has shot himself in the head. He has done so out of a sense of guilt over having killed Sandra.
Kenda needs to confirm that theory with Bob, but that could be hard with a bullet in his brain.
Yeah, we think he killed his ex earlier, and we're gonna need to talk to him. Any idea when he may come to?
Still awake.
He's still awake.
You can question him right now.
And the surgeon kind of smiled and he said, if you're going to get shot in the head, this is not a bad place to do it. What do you mean? He said, frontal lobe wounds are very odd. Sometimes they don't do anything.
How you doing, Bob?
I'm good. How are you?
We're investigating the murder of Sandra Johnson, and that's brought us to you.
Okay.
He is amused that the police are here. That in itself is a statement.
Would you like to inform Bob of his rights, please?
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to have an attorney present during questioning. If you can't afford one will be appointed for you. Do you understand these rights?
Yeah, I understand.
And with these rights in mind, are you willing to talk to us about what happened?
Just want a public defender, okay?
With Bob requesting an attorney, Kenda knows he won't be getting a statement. But that's not the only way to get evidence out of Bob.
Do you know when they're going to operate on him?
Probably tonight.
Perfect. Can you make sure you tell the surgeon to save the bullet fragments they take out of his brain?
Sure.
I'll swing by in a few hours with a warrant.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the following day, I get good news. We contact the hospital. We did operate on him. The bullet out of his head is a .22 caliber. This bullet is the same caliber as the bullets that were used to kill Sandra Johnson.
Not only is the bullet a crucial piece of evidence,
Great, thanks.
it also explains something that's been troubling Kenda since the investigation started.
At the beginning of this case, I was looking at that gun and finding 4 expended casings and wondering what happened to the 4th bullet. At that moment, I realized I had it in a biohazard bag. That 4th bullet was in his head. And I still have an ace in the hole, and that's 15-year-old Nikki Johnson, the girl who was too distressed to talk to.
Since the shooting, Nikki has been staying with her father, Dale Johnson. Kenda hopes that she's calmed down enough to talk.
Hey, Nikki, sweetie. Can you answer a few questions for these detectives?
Nikki, I'm Detective Kenda. I'm very sorry about your mom. I know this is difficult, but can you tell me what happened?
She says she is sitting in the living room reading something when there's a knock at the door.
Are you expecting anyone?
No. Are you?
No. What?
Sandra.
What are you doing here? You were drunk. You were
Damn
not
right I'm
supposed to
drunk.
come here when you're drunk. You need to leave.
No, I'm not leaving.
Yes.
You get drunk too if you gotta get done by some rich
Oh,
bitch.
my-
Like,
you
I'm
don't
not going
leave.
anywhere.
I'm
I'm staying
calling
right
the
here.
police.
You call the police. This prissy pants. I'm not leaving. You talk to me, Sandra.
Bob advances toward her, and she picks up the phone. He takes the phone out of her hand.
You're not calling the police. Don't call me.
Go to the neighbors. Go to the neighbors.
The suspect grabbed her shirt and kept her from leaving the house, but she was able to break away
You're not going anywhere.
and ran across the street hysterical and contacted the police.
He has a scheme, and he has a gun. As soon as that daughter goes out the front door, he proceeds with his plan.
Kenda suspects that while Bob stood over Sandra's body, he turned the gun on himself.
You can speculate for all day and the rest of tomorrow as to what is going through this man's mind. I have no idea.
But Bob's suicide attempt is a failure.
You say to yourself, well, there's more bullets. True. But now he's in pain. The pain brought him back to reality from that gunshot wound. He leaves the gun on the floor. He goes out the back door. He gets in his truck. He drives 12 miles home with a bullet in his brain. It's hard to imagine, but I believe that's exactly what happened.
Did you ever see him after that? Again, I'm very sorry about all this. But because of you, we got this guy. Thank you. Thanks.
That is the final nail in Bob's coffin. We have the physical evidence, and now we have the statement of an eyewitness.
Bob Ambos recovers from his self-inflicted injury and pleads guilty to second-degree murder. He is sentenced to 40 years behind bars.
Sandra Johnson died because she was unable to detect the personality disorders in Bob. She ultimately did determine what and who he was, but it was way too late.
Coming up, Kenda uncovers the grisly truth behind an apparent hit and run.
You see, the problem is there's blood all over your car. Maybe a fairy brought it in the night. There's a tooth fairy. Maybe there's a blood fairy.
For exclusive footage, go to investigationdiscovery.com. It's well before dawn on a cloudy Colorado morning, and Lt.Joe Kenda is wide awake, cleaning his service weapon and mulling over his current caseload.
One would expect me to be asleep, but I don't sleep well because of what I do for a living.
It's Kenda.
There was a voice of surprise on the end of the line. Are you awake?
Yeah, I'm awake. What do you need?
Well, we're got officers at the 1100 block of Caramillo, and they have a dead body in the street.
All right, I'll be right there.
When you sign up for this, you have to remember that you're joining a club that is unique. It operates 365 days a year, 24/7. It never stops. And violence never takes a holiday.
With little in the way of pre-dawn traffic, Kenda arrives at the scene within minutes.
So when I pulled up, there were a few policemen there, some crime scene tape, and that was it.
Gentlemen, so what do we got?
Well, I was driving down here on patrol, and I see this guy laying here. I get out with him. He's already dead.
The bloodied body lies in the middle of the street.
Any ID?
It looks like he's got a wallet in his pocket, but I didn't go digging around.
I will leave that for the coroner.
Yes, sir.
He's on his left side, and his right side is rolled toward the pavement. The odd skew of the legs and arms. I've seen that before. He has been dragged under a vehicle for about 30 to 35 feet.
But until the coroner arrives, a more thorough examination of the body will have to wait.
There's a great deal of blood on the body, and a great deal of blood around the body. The circumstances would all indicate auto pedestrian hit and run drunk driver. Makes perfect sense. But I'm not ready to just make that judgment yet until we have an opportunity to examine the remains. So when the coroner gets there, I accompany him to the body.
Any ID? We think there's a wallet in his pocket, but we haven't touched anything.
All right.
He then takes it out. We find a Colorado driver's license identifying this individual as Francis Kowaleski. He is 42 years of age. He's a retired member of the United States military, and he lives in the general neighborhood.
While the coroner continues inspecting the victim, Kenda instructs officers to canvass the neighborhood.
I'll go knock on some doors, see if anyone saw anything.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
We start waking people up. At 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning in a residential neighborhood, very few people are going to be awake.
Morning, ma'am.
What's going on?
Sorry to wake you up. I'm with the police department.
We're investigating a hit and run that happened about a block away from here.
Because this incident occurred during the middle of the night, we were unable to locate anybody that could provide any type of clue or any type of information that would assist us in the investigation.
Hopeful that the coroner has uncovered something more useful, Kenda turns his attention back to the victim.
Have you discovered anything yet?
Blunt force trauma consistent with a hit and run.
But I found something else I think is going to intrigue you.
At least 2 serious stab wounds.
He's been stabbed. So now we have this interesting circumstance. Is it a stabbing followed by the perpetrator who commits the stabbing running over him? Or is it the other scenario where he is stabbed, he collapses in the street, and a drunk drives up and inadvertently runs over a man who is either dead or dying from stab wounds to the chest? It could be either one. Well, we've certainly answered one question. It is a homicide.
Could Francis Kowaleski have been mugged? Kenda doesn't think so.
Mr. Kowaleski still has his wallet, and it contains money. At this point in this investigation, very hard to say whether Mr. Kowaleski knew his killer or not, but the likelihood, I think, is pretty good that he did.
That comes back as his current address.
All right, thank you.
If I'm right that he dies at the hands of someone he knows, then the first step is to find out who he knows.
As the sun rises over Colorado Springs, Kenda makes his way to Francis Kowaleski's apartment complex.
Excuse me, sir. You know Francis Kowaleski?
You mean Frank? Yeah, he's on the second floor, number 15, live with Peterman.
15 right on the end there?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So we went to Mr. Peterman's apartment. We knock, we get no response.
Can I help you, gentlemen?
Mr. Peterman?
That's right.
We asked you a few questions about Francis Kowaleski.
Yeah, I'll be right up.
Mr. Peterman works nights, and he's coming home from work.
What's this about?
I'm sorry to say he was killed last night.
Oh, my God.
He knows Frank pretty well. He's distressed about the fact that he's now dead, but he doesn't really know what Frank does with his time.
He was a good guy. He was kind of down on his luck lately. He couldn't find work. That's why he was staying here with me.
Francis Kowaleski was someone who lived day to day. He picked up jobs where he could.
He spent time fishing at Prospect Lake in Colorado Springs, and he had a daughter back in New York.
Do you happen to know who he was with last night?
Not really. He's down from New York City. He doesn't know a whole lot of people around here. Here's one guy he hangs out with, Mike Murphy.
Mike was in his 20s. Frank was in his 40s. So there was quite an age difference. Mike had a car, Frank didn't. Mike didn't have any money, Frank had money. So you get this confluence of a situation. I'll drive you to the liquor store, you buy the liquor.
What's the destination tonight?
Drunk.
Cheers to that one.
You know where we can find this, Mike?
He lives over on Bonfoy Street.
All right, well, thank you for your help. Lieutenant Kenda to dispatch. I just sent a unit over to 21 North Bonfoy Street. We're looking for a Mike Murphy.
Moments later, Officer Phil Abbott turns his cruiser onto North Bonfoy Street.
This car is parked across the street from the address of 21 North Bonfoy Street. It is a white Plymouth four-door sedan, and it's a piece of junk.
The officer immediately notices something alarming.
170 to Kenda.
Officer Abbott jumps on the radio and says, "Hey, there's a car parked in the 0-100 block of this street.
We've got your car. There's blood all over the side of it.
Something I learned a long time ago as a policeman: if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So at this point in this investigation, Francis Kovaleski, dead in the street. He's been stabbed, run over, and now we've found a car that has what looks like blood on it.
Having been dispatched to the home of 24-year-old Mike Murphy, Patrol Officer Phil Abbott cautiously approaches the vehicle in question.
As they pulled up behind the vehicle, they noticed that someone was in the car.
Morning, officer. Hey, what's your name? Mike Murphy. Mike, is this your car? Yeah, that's the best car I've ever owned.
Abbott looks at the blood, takes another look at him and says, "You're not going anywhere."
I need you to put your hands on the car. Yeah, what's going on?
Spins him around, puts him on the hood of the car, cuffs him, and puts him in the cage in his cruiser. This car is covered in blood from about the midline of the door down to the base of the car, all the way along the right fender. You have to think to yourself, there is a God.
En route to police headquarters, Kenda radios Detective Skip Arms to take a search warrant over to the Murphy residence and interview the suspect's family. Once he's back at headquarters, Kenda questions Mike Murphy.
Do you know Frank Kovaleski?
Sure, he's my buddy. Why?
Because he turned up dead last night.
I don't know anything about that.
When was the last time you saw him?
I saw him on Sunday.
According to Mike, the last time he saw Frank was 2 days before he died.
He doesn't know anything about anybody getting stabbed, and he's not sure why we'd talk to him at all. Well, Mike, you see, the problem is there's blood all over your car.
Frank had ulcers, so
So how'd blood end up on your car?
when he got sick and, he threw up.
Damn, that's gonna make us act up again. All right, damn ulcers.
So you think he threw up blood on your car?
Needless to say, Kenda is skeptical.
Maybe a fairy brought it in the night. Huh, Mike? There's a tooth fairy. Maybe there's a blood fairy. Looking at this individual, I'm speaking to someone who has the IQ of a turnip. I can feel it in my bones. This is the guy, and I'm convinced I can make him tell me.
Across town, Detective Skip Arms is busy interviewing Mike's wife, Sandra, and his mother, Joyce.
Do you know when the last time you saw Mike with Frank?
They were together last night.
The fact that Sandra places Frank in the car contradicts Michael's statement that he hadn't seen Frank for 2 days.
But it's Mike Murphy's mother, Joyce, who reveals the reality of the two men's strained relationship.
Mike was arrested for a DUI recently when they were out drinking. And he got really mad at Frank because he refused to post his $40 bond to get him out of jail.
This information really is the first motive we get out of this investigation.
Excuse me a minute.
Detective Arms relays this information to Kenda.
Hey, Skip, what'd you find out?
This is a huge fact to know. So now it's time to play You Bet Your Life with Mike.
Mike, I think you need to start over and tell me exactly what happened.
I said, Mike, I gotta tell you. You tell the worst story I've ever heard, and I have heard a lot of stories.
Okay, so maybe Frank was in my car, but he was fine when I let him out.
Do you think he walked out of your car and ran into a knife 6 times, Mike? Who the hell do you think you're talking to here? I said, let me tell you what happened.
All right, man, let's go get some beers.
All right.
I think that they went to one of their bars they normally go to. They get in some verbal altercation.
Dude, are you just gonna sit here and mope and be stupid all night? Look, dude, just drop it, okay?
Let's just get it over with right now.
All right, fine. Wanna do that?
He gets out in the middle of the street, and they're going to have a fight. Mike's flash temper kicks in. The fight begins. Mike isn't doing well in the fight. And then you're not satisfied. You're not happy because maybe he's not dead, huh, Mike? So you get back in your ride and you run over him. How am I doing, Mike? Pretty good. Tell me I'm wrong.
I thought he had a gun.
Did he pull a gun on you?
No.
Well, I drove around him, and then I thought, you know, I'm gonna make sure. And I went back and hit him because I was pissed.
Stand up, put your hands behind your back.
Mike Murphy is charged with first-degree murder.
Nothing about his demeanor indicated remorse. He was annoyed that he had been caught.
Mike Murphy is sentenced to 40 years in prison for the murder of Francis Kowaleski.
Francis Kowaleski didn't expect anything bad to happen. He didn't feel like he had done anything wrong.
Frank Kowaleski died because he wasn't careful when he selected his friends. Did he know that Michael had a flash temper? I don't know the answer to that, but he certainly did have one. And Frank experienced it in the last moments of his time on Earth.
The first thing they noticed was the silence, too clean, too deliberate, like the night itself had been edited, spliced, scrubbed of sound. On a street in Racine where porch lights usually hum like fireflies and someone's radio always leaks through a cracked window, there was nothing. No music. No laughter. No dog barking back at the dark. Just a pale porch bulb flickering like a nervous pulse, and a front door pulled shut with the kind of force that says someone left fast or someone made sure they wouldn't come back. It's the year 2000. A new millennium. Fresh calendars. Fresh promises. People talk like everything is about to change. In Racine, the air off Lake Michigan bites sharp in the colder months, and the wind has a way of making every alley sound like it's whispering secrets. The city is small enough that strangers stand out, and tight enough that rumors travel faster than police cruisers. It's the kind of place where you can still buy coffee at a diner that never updates its menu, where the waitress remembers your order and your mother's name, where a tragedy doesn't stay private, because grief, here, leaks through the walls. Her name, say it once and it lands heavy. The kind of name people lower their voices for. Not because it's famous, but because it's attached to a hole that never closed. She's 20-something. Young enough to still look like the yearbook photo in her mother's hallway, old enough to have responsibilities stacked like dishes in a sink. She works. She shows up. She has plans scribbled on scraps of paper, appointments, bills, grocery lists, the ordinary scaffolding of a life that feels sturdy right up until the moment it collapses. And then, one night, she vanishes into the space between minutes. It doesn't happen with a scream that wakes the block. It doesn't happen with a gunshot that sends neighbors running to windows. It happens with the soft violence of absence. A car left where it shouldn't be. A purse that's too neatly set down. A light still on in a room no one is in. The kind of details that look harmless until they form a shape in your mind and you realize that shape is panic. Someone notices she hasn't called. Someone tries again. No answer. Someone says, maybe she fell asleep early. Maybe she's out. Maybe her phone died. And in that thin layer of denial, those first hours where people try to keep the world normal, time drains away like water through cracked hands. When police arrive, they do what police always do at the beginning, they look for the simple explanation. A misunderstanding. A lover's fight. A spontaneous road trip. A bad habit returning. Because the brain wants patterns, and the system wants to close cases before they grow teeth. But the house gives off a feeling you can't file neatly. It's not messy. It's not ransacked. It's worse than that. It's staged in a way that suggests control. Like someone stepped into her life, moved through it with purpose, and stepped out again, leaving just enough behind to confuse everyone who came after. The neighborhood is awake now. Curtains twitch. People linger at the ends of driveways pretending to check their mail. Every car that passes slows just a little. Racine does that thing small towns do when fear starts to bloom, it pulls inward. Locks click earlier. Parents watch their kids with sharpened eyes. Strangers get measured from head to toe. Women text each other to say, "You home?" Men stand in garages too long, staring at nothing, because staring at nothing feels safer than imagining the worst. A detective speaks to the family in a tone that sounds calm but isn't. Calm is a mask. Calm is a tool. Because behind the calm is the same thought everyone has but no one wants to say out loud: people don't just disappear cleanly. Not without help. Not without leaving some kind of trail. Not unless someone wanted them gone. The search begins the way searches always begin: flashlights, flyers, names shouted into the wind. Volunteers in heavy coats. Cars idling at the curb, heaters blasting, windows fogging with breath. The smell of wet leaves and cheap coffee. Someone suggests checking the parks. Someone else says the lake. The lake is always there, enormous and indifferent, like it could swallow anything and never change its face. They check ditches. They check back roads. They check the places teenagers go to hide, the places addicts go to disappear, the places nobody goes unless they don't want to be seen. Then come the questions. Who did she last talk to? Who did she last trust? Who had reason to be angry? Who had reason to want her quiet? You watch the circle tighten, and you realize how quickly suspicion can turn a community into a courtroom. Friends become witnesses. Exes become headlines. Neighbors become theories. The timeline is a blade. Every minute matters, because in missing person cases, the first hours are oxygen. Investigators work backwards from the last confirmed sighting. A coworker remembers her leaving, maybe tired, maybe distracted. A cashier recalls her buying something small, something mundane, gum, a soda, like life was ordinary up until the moment it wasn't. A neighbor thinks they heard a car door slam late at night but can't be sure. Another says they saw headlights pause at the corner. Another says they saw nothing at all, and that becomes its own kind of statement, because in a town like this, nothing can mean you weren't looking or you were looking and didn't want to admit what you saw. They find her car. Or maybe the car is already there, too perfectly placed to ignore. It's the kind of detail that becomes iconic in the file: the angle of the tires, the position of the seat, the keys missing or not missing. Was it moved? Was it left? Was it a message? The inside smells faintly of her perfume and something else, something metallic the officers don't name out loud. You can feel a shift in the room when they open the door. The air changes. The case changes. Because the car isn't just transportation anymore. It's a container. It's a clue box. It's a confession that no one has signed. Evidence collection in 2000 is not what it is now. DNA exists, yes, but it's not magic yet. Not fast. Not cheap. Not clean. A few hairs. A smudge on fabric. A partial print. The lab backlog like a slow choke. Detectives photograph everything, bag everything, label everything, because they know, somewhere in the bones of law enforcement, this could turn cold. And if it turns cold, these plastic bags and sealed envelopes will be the only voices left speaking. The family sits at a kitchen table that has become command central. Phones ring. Not enough. Too much. News crews arrive, hungry for a story with a face. The mother keeps her hands busy because stillness invites collapse. The father says the same sentence over and over: she wouldn't just leave. A sibling stares at the wall like the wall might answer. Someone pins a photo to a board, her smiling, her eyes bright, frozen in time before the world cracked. That photo is the version of her everyone clings to, because the alternative version, the one in the dark, alone, afraid, is unbearable. Investigators begin knocking on doors. They ask about men in the area. Vans. Strange calls. They ask about parties, fights, debts, secrets. They ask about the people who orbit her life. And the people who orbit her life begin to realize that orbiting isn't harmless when gravity changes. There's a boyfriend, or an ex, or someone who wants to be described as, it's complicated. There's always someone like that. There are phone records, numbers, times, gaps. There are alibis delivered with too much detail. There are rumors about jealousy and control, about a temper people knew about but didn't want to name. And there's the ugly truth that hangs over almost every case like this: the most dangerous place for many women is the space where someone feels entitled to them. But it isn't that simple. It never stays that simple. Because every time detectives think they've found the straight line, it bends. The boyfriend's story checks out just enough to stay out of cuffs. The ex is volatile but accounted for. The neighbor with the odd behavior is creepy but not a criminal. A co-worker who acted strange turns out to be grieving in their own broken way. The case fills with people who look wrong, sound wrong, feel wrong, and yet nothing sticks. A witness calls in. They claim they saw a woman matching her description near an industrial area, warehouse lights, chain-link fences, the smell of oil and lake damp. Another says they saw a similar car on a frontage road. Another says they heard yelling somewhere near a vacant lot. Tips pour in like rainwater, every drop a possibility, every puddle a false reflection. Detectives chase them, and with every dead end, the file grows heavier. Then, something. A single object. A trace. A detail too sharp to ignore. Maybe it's a piece of jewelry found where it shouldn't be. Maybe it's a torn scrap of fabric snagged on brush. Maybe it's nothing more than a smear on a door frame, a fingerprint on a surface that shouldn't hold one. The detectives don't celebrate. They don't high-five. They go quiet. Because real evidence isn't cinematic. It's grim. It's a whisper that says, you're not looking for a missing person anymore. You're looking for what's left. The community starts splitting into camps. The ones who believe she'll walk back in any day now. The ones who look at the lake and think of weight and water. The ones who blame the police. The ones who blame her. Because in every case like this, there are people who can't handle randomness, so they manufacture moral lessons. They say, she should have been more careful. She shouldn't have trusted him. She shouldn't have been out late. They say it like it protects them. Like blaming her builds a wall around their own daughters. Days pass. Then weeks. The posters fade in the sun and peel at the corners. Her face becomes part of the city's wallpaper, on telephone poles, on bulletin boards, taped to storefront windows. Have you seen her? Becomes a question people start avoiding, because answering, no, feels like guilt. The detectives get tired in a way coffee can't fix. They replay interviews. They compare statements. They look for the micro-flinch, the swallowed word, the eyes that don't match the mouth. They drive the same roads at the same times, trying to see what the killer, or the abductor, or whatever monster lives in this story, might have seen. They stare at maps marked with pins and lines like a war room. Racine becomes a chessboard, and someone out there has already made their move. And here's what makes a case like this rot into legend: the mystery doesn't just sit in one place. It spreads. It infects ordinary life. Every creak in a house at night becomes suspect. Every unknown car becomes a threat. Every woman walking to her vehicle alone feels the shadow of her disappearance like a hand on the back of the neck. When the media attention spikes, there's a moment where it feels like the whole country is looking. And then, inevitably, the cameras move on. Another tragedy. Another headline. Another face. But in Racine, the absence doesn't move on. It stays. It becomes a permanent chair at the table no one sits in. It becomes a name said on anniversaries, on birthdays, on holidays that now taste like metal. Evidence goes into storage. Leads dry up. The case file thickens until it's a brick of paper and heartbreak. The detectives age. Some transfer. Some retire. Some carry it like a stone in the pocket for the rest of their lives. The family learns a new language, one made of maybes and waiting. They learn to live next to uncertainty the way people live next to train tracks, always bracing for impact, always listening for the sound that means something is coming. And still, the questions remain sharp. Who walked into her life that night? Who knew her routine? Who understood the rhythms of that street, that porch light, that silent hour? Was it someone close, someone who could knock and be welcomed in? Or someone watching from a distance, patient, predatory, learning her patterns like a hunter learns paths through woods? In the quiet after the search teams leave and the last reporter packs up, Racine returns to its routines, work shifts, school pickups, Friday night lights, yet the city feels slightly tilted, like the ground moved under everyone's feet and never quite settled back. The porch bulb that flickered that first night gets replaced, but people swear the street never looks the same. Because once you understand how quickly a person can be erased, every normal day starts to feel like a fragile illusion. And somewhere in that illusion, the case waits, unresolved, unblinking, like a file folder that never closes, like a name that refuses to fade, like a cold case that doesn't just belong to the police but to every locked door, every glance over a shoulder, every mother who listens for footsteps that should have been coming home. The phone lines don't go quiet after the first wave of panic, they change tone, that's all, from frantic to brittle, from, have you seen her, to, I think I know something, and every, something, arrives wrapped in static and human fear. A woman calls at midnight and swears she heard crying near the railroad tracks. A man calls from a payphone and says he saw a figure climb into a dark sedan, no plates, no lights, like the car was built for vanishing. A teenager calls and laughs at first, like it's a joke, then stops laughing and whispers a name before hanging up. The detectives log it all, line by line, because in a case like this, even nonsense is dangerous, you never know which lie is hiding the truth. They go back to the house again. The same hallway. The same air. The same feeling that the walls have memorized what happened and won't tell. They photograph the door frame, the floorboards, the edges of the carpet where dust collects like a quiet witness. They look at the windows and the locks and the little imperfections that say whether someone came in gently or forced their way in. They inventory what's missing and what's still there, because absence has a pattern too. There's a strange discipline to it, this second look. The first visit is about urgency. The second is about hunger, hunger for the detail everyone missed while adrenaline was screaming. They start with her routine, because routines are footprints. Work schedule. Commute. Stops on the way home. Who she spoke to on breaks. Who she avoided. Who lingered too long by her desk. Co-workers say she was normal, and normal, in these interviews always sounds like someone trying to protect themselves from guilt. A supervisor recalls she mentioned being tired. A friend says she seemed distracted in the last week, like she had a heavy thought she didn't want to set down. Someone mentions a man, just a name, tossed into the air as if it means nothing, but in the detective's notebook, it lands like a metal weight. The problem is there are too many men in the orbit. Too many, could be. Too many, maybe he liked her. Too many, I heard they argued. And every, could be, is a corridor with a door at the end. The detectives start opening doors. They pull background checks. They cross-reference addresses. They look at restraining orders and old fights and driving records and petty crimes that might not be petty when you put them next to a disappearance. They find familiar shapes, the ex who can't let go, the coworker with the wrong kind of interest, the acquaintance who shows up at places he shouldn't, the man who jokes too hard when the subject turns serious. They bring people in. The interview rooms are fluorescent and cold, designed to make honesty uncomfortable. The detectives sit across from faces that try to look innocent. Hands fidget. Eyes blink too much or not enough. Words arrive too quickly, like they've been rehearsed, or too slowly, like they're being invented on the spot. Alibis are like paper shields. Some tear fast. Some hold. And the ones that hold, those are the ones that haunt, because they mean the monster might be smarter than everyone wants to admit. They press into the phone records. In 2000, the data isn't a slick digital map on a big screen. It's paper. It's printouts. It's hours of staring at numbers until they start looking like code. Calls made. Calls received. Gaps. A single incoming call at an odd hour that lasts only seconds. A number that appears, disappears, then appears again like a pulse. They try to attach names to digits. They subpoena. They knock on doors. They ask, "Do you recognize this number?" over and over until the question feels like a chant. A few calls stand out. Short. Sharp. The kind that feel like check-ins. The kind that feel like someone making sure she's alone. The kind that feel like the last thread connecting her to the world before it snaps. And then there's the silence after, no outgoing calls, no wandering signal, no accidental pocket dial. A clean stop. A line cut with purpose. They search the car like it's a second crime scene, because sometimes the real story isn't where she disappeared, it's where she was taken, where she fought, where she tried to survive. They vacuum fibers. They swab surfaces. They lift prints from the steering wheel, the door handle, the mirror, any place skin might have pressed in panic. And they find the usual, her prints, the prints of people who rode with her before, smudges without identity. Maybe they find a hair that doesn't belong. Maybe they find a trace of something under a seat, tiny, almost nothing, but almost nothing is what cases are built on. In the lab, a technician runs the early DNA processes with the careful patience of someone handling fragile glass. The sample is partial. Degraded. Not enough for a full profile, or enough for a profile that can be trusted in court. In 2000, the science is strong but still limited by reality, heat, time, contamination, the way evidence suffers from being alive in the world. The detectives get results that are both promising and infuriating. Something is there, but not enough to point a finger. They ask the family for DNA, because elimination is a kind of progress. They ask exes. They ask people who had access. Some refuse. Some comply with a confidence that reads as arrogance. Some comply while sweating through their shirts, and the detectives mark those moments in their minds, because fear is a signal too, though it doesn't always mean guilt. It sometimes just means people are realizing how close the darkness is. The case starts attracting the wrong attention. Psychics call. They say she's near water. They say she's trapped underground. They say they see a red truck or a blue door. The family listens because families always listen. Hope is a hunger, and hunger makes you swallow anything. The detectives listen with stone faces, because stone faces are how you survive the chaos. They have to separate human desperation from usable fact, and sometimes the line between them is thin enough to cut you. A rumor spreads that she was seen at a gas station outside town. Another rumor says she ran away. Another says she owed someone money. Another says she was targeted because she saw something she shouldn't have seen. The rumors multiply because people can't tolerate a blank space. They fill it in with stories to make it feel less terrifying, and the stories become weapons. A man gets side-eyed at the grocery store because he drove the same model car. A woman stops talking to her neighbor because her cousin's friend said he had a temper. Racine tightens again, not with unity, but with suspicion. Then the investigators get a tip that feels different. Not louder. Not more dramatic. Just precise. A caller doesn't ramble. They don't speculate. They give a detail only someone close to the truth would know, an item she carried, a phrase she said, a place that wasn't public. The detective holds the receiver like it's a live wire, asks calm questions, tries to keep the voice talking, but the caller slips away, leaving behind a breadcrumb that tastes like iron. They follow it. They drive to the location. It's a place where the city thins out, industrial lots, overgrown fields, the kind of edges where people dump what they don't want. The wind is sharper there, carrying the lake's damp breath. Officers comb the ground. Dogs sniff. Flashlights cut through weeds. They find trash. They find bottles. They find old tires. They find evidence of other small crimes, the leftovers of human carelessness. And maybe they find something that makes everyone stop at once. A piece of fabric. A scrap of paper with a familiar handwriting. A charm. A single shoe. Something that doesn't scream but whispers, and the whisper is enough to make a grown man's stomach turn. If they find it, they bag it like it's sacred. If they don't, the air still changes, because the act of searching a place like that tells you something. Someone, somewhere, believes the truth touched this ground. And when the truth touches the ground, it leaves a stain that time cannot fully wash. They widen the circle again. They check old reports. They ask if anyone else disappeared in a similar way. They look at the map like it's a face and try to read its expression. They connect dots that might not connect, because the alternative is accepting that this was a one-off, a random strike, a lightning bolt that chose her and no one else. Detectives hate randomness. It's the enemy of closure. The interviews keep coming. One man is brought in because he bragged in a bar, half drunk, half mean, about knowing what happened. In the light of day, he claims it was a joke. He laughs too loudly. He tries to turn it into theater, tries to pull power from the attention. The detective doesn't blink. The detective lets the silence do the work. Jokes die in silence. Men like that collapse when the room refuses to play along. But the bragging doesn't lead to the body. It doesn't lead to the weapon. It doesn't lead to the undeniable. Another person emerges, someone who knew her through work, through friends, through the thin social web that ties a city together. Their behavior after the disappearance is off. They show up at vigils but don't look at the candles. They ask questions too early, questions that sound like reconnaissance. They talk about her in the past tense. They insert themselves into the story like they want to be written into it. The detectives watch. They document. They check their timeline. They check their car. They check their trash. They check their basement, their shed, their storage unit, every private space where a secret could be kept. And yet the case resists. It resists like a door held shut from the other side. The days become months. The months become a year. Investigators rotate. New faces take the file and read the old notes and feel, for a moment, like they're stepping into a frozen room where the air still holds the last breath of urgency. They call old numbers that are disconnected. They visit addresses where different families live now. They knock and explain, and the new residents stare back with the uncomfortable expression of people realizing they're renting a home with a shadow. The family keeps going because stopping would mean admitting defeat. They do interviews. They hold fundraisers. They print fresh flyers. They plead on local news, their voices tightening at the edges, their eyes carrying a permanent redness. They say her name. They say her name like a spell. They say her name like if they keep saying it, the world will be forced to return her. Every anniversary reopens the wound in public. There's always a small gathering, always candles, always the same cold air and the same question hanging like smoke, where is she? The detectives stand at the edge sometimes, hands in pockets, faces hard. Not because they don't care. Because caring too openly can ruin you, and police work has a way of demanding you stay functional even when you're drowning. Somewhere in the middle years, the case becomes a cold case, and the words hit the family like a slap. Cold. Like the world is moving on. Cold. Like the pain is supposed to freeze over and become manageable. But grief doesn't freeze cleanly. It just changes texture. It becomes something you carry. The evidence stays. The boxes stay. The envelopes sealed with signatures stay. And in those boxes is a future no one can see yet, because science is moving in the background, because databases are growing, because the world is quietly becoming the kind of place where a single skin cell can be a megaphone. The cold case unit reopens files with a different kind of patience. Not the frantic sprint of the first days, but the slow, relentless grind of time. They look at the old evidence and ask a new question: what can we do now that we couldn't do then? They take out the swabs. They take out the hairs. They take out the tiny, stubborn trace that refused to speak in 2000. They send it back to the lab with newer methods, sharper tools, a better chance. And when the results come back, they are still not a confession. Not yet. They are a door cracked open. A partial profile. A stronger signal. Something that can be compared against databases that didn't exist when the millennium was new. The detectives stare at the printout like it's a map to a buried grave. They know this could be the moment the case warms up. They also know this could be another cruel tease, another almost. Still, the feeling shifts again in Racine. Not because the public knows. The public rarely knows in real time. The feeling shifts because somewhere in a police building, lights stay on later. Because somewhere, a detective who has seen too many dead ends feels a faint, electric tug, the sense that the silence from that first night might finally be about to break, and whatever made it silent is about to be dragged into the light kicking and screaming, whether it wants to be there or not. The evidence box opens with a sound that shouldn't matter, but it does, tape tearing, cardboard flexing, because it's the closest thing to a heartbeat this case has had in years. Inside, everything is smaller than the grief that's grown around it. Swabs in paper sleeves. Envelopes stamped with dates that look ancient now. A hair caught in a fold of evidence paper like a single question mark. A stain that once refused to speak. In 2000 it was a whisper. Now, in a world where laboratories can coax identities out of dust, that whisper has a chance to become a name. The cold case unit works different. They don't rush. They circle. They read every report like scripture and listen for the verse that never made sense. They pull the photos again, crime scene shots with harsh flash glare, the kind of pictures that don't feel like the past, they feel like a room you can still walk into if you close your eyes. They trace the timeline with a fingertip on paper and stop at the same point everyone stopped before, the moment she stepped into the dark and never came back. Technology has evolved, but human behavior hasn't. People still lie the same way. They still hide in the same places. They still build excuses out of the same cheap materials. I don't remember, I was asleep, I barely knew her. What changes is the pressure. Because now the evidence doesn't need a confession. It doesn't need a witness. It just needs contact. One touch. One careless moment. One skin cell left behind like arrogance. They send the sample out. Not with fanfare, but with the kind of quiet you use when you're afraid to jinx hope. The lab tech calls back days later, voice tight, careful, like they know they're holding a match over gasoline. The profile is stronger than before. Not perfect, but usable. A partial becomes a pattern. A pattern becomes a possibility. The detective writes down the numbers, alleles, loci, a code that looks like nonsense until it becomes a face. They run it through CODIS first, the obvious move, the old move. And it comes back the way most cold cases come back, no match. A blank screen. A dead stare. The suspect isn't in the system, or the suspect has never been caught for anything that required DNA on file, or the suspect is the kind of person who lives clean on paper while doing dirty things in the dark. So they pivot to the newer world, the controversial world, the world that makes headlines. Genetic genealogy. The phrase sounds gentle, family trees, ancestry, history, but in police hands it's a weapon. It's the idea that you can't hide alone because you don't exist alone. Blood ties. Cousins. Distant relatives who mailed their saliva to a company for fun, never imagining it could light up a murder investigation like a flare. The cold case detective knows the power and knows the backlash. They know the ethical debates, the lawsuits, the headlines screaming about privacy and overreach. They also know one thing more important than all of it: a young woman disappeared, and someone got to keep breathing afterward. The lab builds a profile for forensic genealogy. It takes time and money and precision. Not the sloppy drama people expect. This is spreadsheets and patience, lab coats and late nights. A scientist isolates the usable markers, constructs something that can be compared against public genealogy databases, only the ones permitted by policy, only the ones where users opted in. Even in the hunt, there are rules. The detective doesn't trust rules to stop monsters, but they follow them anyway, because the goal isn't just to know, it's to prove. And then, something finally happens. Not a name. Not an address. A hint. A cluster. A set of potential relatives in the database, third cousins, fourth cousins, people scattered across states like seeds in the wind. The genealogist starts mapping. Birth records. Marriage licenses. Obituaries. Census data. Social media profiles with smiling faces that have no idea they're connected to a nightmare. The tree grows outward, then inward, narrowing like a funnel. The detective watches the process with a feeling that's hard to name. It's not excitement. It's closer to dread. Because every time you approach the truth, you also approach what the truth contains. If they find him, if this leads to a person, it means a real human being did this. Someone who went to work the next day. Someone who bought groceries. Someone who sat at a table with other people and laughed. The monster won't look like a monster. It never does. The genealogist calls with a shortlist. A family line that keeps circling back to Wisconsin. A branch with several males of the right age range in 2000. The detective spreads photos across a table. Driver's license images. Yearbook pictures. Mugshots. Social media profile shots taken decades later, faces older, eyes still the same. They look for something impossible, something cinematic, a flash of recognition that tells them, yes, that's him. But photos don't confess. They just stare back. They build a list of candidates and start the old work again, who lived where, who worked where, who had access, who had a reason. They compare addresses to the victim's route. They compare employment records. They cross-check vehicle registrations from 2 decades ago, when people drove different cars and thought less about cameras. They ask themselves the brutal question that always hovers, was it someone close enough to approach her without raising alarm, or someone bold enough to take her anyway? A name rises, not announced, not declared, just drifting to the top of the paperwork like oil on water. A man who worked near her. Not a stranger. Not a family member. The kind of person you'd call an acquaintance, because calling him anything else would require admitting how easily danger can blend into daily life. He's older now. The kind of older that comes with softer edges, receding hairline, maybe a marriage, maybe children, maybe a reputation in the community that sounds stable if you don't look too hard. They don't go in loud. They don't kick doors. They observe. Surveillance first. They watch his house from a distance, the way hunters watch a clearing. They note his habits. When he leaves. When he returns. Who visits. What he throws away. Trash day becomes a ritual. Because trash is honest. People discard what they think is meaningless, and sometimes what they discard is everything. The detectives pull his background. Nothing explosive. A few minor incidents. A couple of arguments. The kind of paper trail that makes him look ordinary with a slight tilt toward trouble. He held jobs. He paid bills. He existed without drawing the spotlight. The type of person who survives because no one expects him to be the villain. They find old co-workers, people who were young then and tired now, and ask about him. Some say he was quiet. Some say he was a creep. Some shrug and say they don't remember. Memory is slippery, and time is a thief. But one person pauses too long and says, almost casually, he used to hang around after shift. Always watching. The detective writes it down. Watching is a habit. Watching is rehearsal. They need his DNA. They can't just ask and expect a yes. If he knows anything, if he's guilty, he'll refuse. So they do what modern policing does. They collect what he leaves behind. A cup in a public trash bin. A cigarette butt. A tissue. Anything with spit, skin, sweat. It feels invasive, and it is. But it's legal when done right, and law is just society's line in the sand. The detective stands in the cold with latex gloves and a brown evidence bag, waiting for the smallest piece of him to become the loudest sound in the case. The sample goes to the lab. The lab runs it. The lab calls back. And the answer is not the clean, satisfying ending everyone craves. It's not match. It's not no match. It's complicated. The profile is close. Close enough to make the detective's stomach clench. But not definitive. Not a direct hit, not yet. It suggests the person they sampled is a close relative of the contributor, maybe a brother, a son, a cousin, someone in that same bloodline that the genealogist circled. The detective stares at the report, feeling the case shift again, like the ground under their feet just moved a fraction. The suspect they've been watching might not be the man who touched the evidence. He might be the man who knows the man. He might be the shield. He might be the decoy. Or he might have tried to clean his own trail so thoroughly that what they're reading is contamination from family life, shared DNA scattered through a household like invisible dust. Now the hunt widens, but it widens with focus. They look at brothers. They look at sons. They look at cousins who lived nearby in 2000. They look at who had a car, who had a key, who had a temper, who had an obsession. They look at a family tree that suddenly feels less like ancestry and more like a crime scene. They talk to the man again, but this time with a different posture. Not accusing. Pressing. Asking questions that sound innocent but are designed to trap. Who were you close with then? Who lived with you? Did you ever go near her neighborhood? He answers too smoothly. Or he answers with irritation that feels rehearsed. Or he answers and then corrects himself, the way people do when they realize they've said too much. They watch his eyes when they mention her name. Some people flinch. Some don't. The detective knows not to trust Hollywood instincts. The real tells are smaller, a swallow, a blink, a hand gripping the chair. But sometimes there's nothing at all, and that's worse, because it means the person has practiced. They pull records again, older now, harder to find. They search for anyone connected to that family line who had a reason to cross her path. They find an old address that sits too close to her route home. They find an old job that overlaps in time. They find a history of domestic incidents that never became felonies, because people can hurt others for years without ever landing in a database. They find a man who moved out of state shortly after 2000, a man whose name appears in a different police report years later, a man who doesn't have a neat life online. The detective feels it building, that slow thunder before a storm. They can see the outline of something. They can feel the truth like heat behind a wall. But they still need proof that stands up in court. The difference between suspicion and conviction is a canyon, and in that canyon, killers keep living. They bring in the family members for interviews, and the interviews are tense in a way that makes the room feel smaller. People react badly when you suggest their bloodline might be tied to a disappearance. They get angry. Defensive. Some cry. Some threaten lawsuits. Some offer too much information, eager to point the finger away from themselves. Families close ranks, because the idea that one of your own could be a predator is a poison that turns your memories acidic. And then, just when the momentum feels unstoppable, something happens that always happens in cold cases, a lead collapses. One of the key relatives is dead. Died years ago. Buried under a headstone with dates carved clean, as if the world never knew what else to carve. Another is untraceable, living under a different name, drifting through states like smoke. Another refuses all contact and has a lawyer on speed dial. The detective sits in their office late at night, surrounded by photos and reports and maps, and the case feels like it's breathing, inhale, exhale, just out of reach. Still, there are moments that keep the obsession alive. A neighbor remembers a car parked oddly on the street the night she vanished, a model and color that matches one of the family's old registrations. A coworker recalls her mentioning someone being weird at work, someone who kept showing up where she was. A friend finds an old diary entry, a scribbled line about feeling watched, about locking the door twice. The words are small, ordinary, but they hit like gunshots across time. Because fear leaves marks. Sometimes the only person who documents it is the victim. The detective returns to the original evidence again, because the truth might still be hiding in the first place they looked. They order new testing on additional items, things that were considered low priority in 2000 because resources were limited and everyone was chasing the obvious. They swap corners. They swap seams. They reprocess tape. They use methods that can isolate DNA mixtures, separating voices that used to blend into one incoherent murmur. And the lab sends back another report. Another signal. Not the loud answer the world wants, just another piece sliding into place. It suggests two contributors. Her, and someone else. Someone who touched something they shouldn't have touched. Someone who left behind a signature that time tried to erase. The detective feels the case warming, but warming doesn't mean solved. Warming means volatile. Warming means the possibility of fire. They know that if they push too hard, the suspect, whoever it is, might run, might destroy what's left, might disappear the way she did. They also know that if they move too slowly, time will do what time always does, it will kill witnesses, blur memories, turn certainty into fog. Outside the station, Racine keeps living. Kids grow up and leave. New families move in. Buildings change owners. Streets get repaved. But the old fear lingers in the cracks. People still remember. They still say her name with that careful tone, like speaking it too loudly might summon the night back. The family still wakes up some mornings with a split second of normal, a split second where they forget she's gone, and then the reality slams down again like a door. The detective drives home at dawn after another long night with the file, and the sky over the lake is pale, washed out, the kind of sunrise that looks beautiful until you remember it rose on the morning after she vanished too. The city looks calm. Too calm. The detective knows calm is just what darkness looks like when it's hiding. And somewhere, in some quiet house, someone connected to that DNA wakes up, makes coffee, checks their phone, lives like nothing is coming. But the case is moving now, slow but steady, like ice breaking on a river. The evidence is learning to speak. The family tree is narrowing. The circle is tightening. And in the space between those tightening lines, there is still one ugly, stubborn truth: the person who took her has never had to answer for it, and that unanswered silence is the loudest sound Racine has ever heard. The circle tightens in a way you can't see on a map, only in behavior: cars that make 3 extra turns before going home, curtains that fall back into place too fast, conversations that stop the second someone unfamiliar steps into the room. In the station, it's quieter too, not calmer, just sharper, like every footstep echoes because everyone knows they are walking on something brittle. The detective keeps the case file open on the desk even when working other calls, because closing it feels like letting the darkness win a tiny victory, and the darkness is greedy. It collects victories the way rust collects metal. A warrant doesn't arrive like a thunderclap. It arrives like a grind: signatures and affidavits and careful language built to survive a defense attorney's teeth. Probable cause has to be framed like architecture. Every sentence has to hold weight. The DNA report, the genealogical narrowing, the overlapping timelines, the proximity, the witness memories that surfaced like bones after rain. The detective knows the judge is reading for precision, not emotion, but emotion is there anyway, invisible in every line, because what they're really asking for is permission to tear open a person's life and look for the rot. When the warrant is approved, nobody cheers. There's no cinematic slam of a fist on a desk. There's a nod, a breath, a quiet, let's move. Because the detective understands something the public doesn't: search warrants don't guarantee truth. They just guarantee access. And access can lead to nothing. Or access can lead to a nightmare you can't unsee. They hit the property early, when the world still looks sleepy, when even criminals think they're safe. The sky is a dull slate. Frost clings to grass like ash. There's a moment in the cruiser, parked down the street, where the detective watches the house the way you watch a sleeping animal you're not sure you can kill. The house looks ordinary. That's the first insult. Ordinary siding. Ordinary driveway. Ordinary trash bins. Ordinary life built on top of whatever happened in 2000 like a new coat of paint over mold. The team moves in with practiced choreography, knock, announce, wait, then the hinges. The door swings open and the smell hits first, stale air, old carpet, coffee that's been reheated too many times. The man is there, confused or pretending to be, hair flattened on one side, eyes blinking hard against the sudden light and the sudden authority. He asks what this is about. He says his name like it should protect him. He tries to keep his voice steady, but his hands betray him, rubbing at each other like he's trying to erase an invisible stain. The detective holds up the warrant, reads it out, the words sounding clinical and brutal at the same time. The man's face shifts, anger flashes, then something else, something fast and subtle, like the flicker of a match being shielded from wind. He steps back. He has to. The law is inside now. They split the house into zones. Living room. Bedroom. Basement. Garage. Shed. Every place a secret can hide, every place a memory can be buried. They photograph everything before touching anything, because the camera is the only witness that never forgets. They bag laptops, phones, old notebooks. They pull up floor vents. They inspect crawl spaces. They look behind the water heater, beneath loose boards, inside containers stacked in corners like forgotten coffins. The man talks too much. Or too little. Either way, it's wrong. He tries to narrate the search, to control the story as it unfolds in front of him. He jokes once, a bad joke, a thin joke, and it dies in the air. He asks if they found what they're looking for, and the detective hears the question behind the question, do you know? Do you really know? Or are you just guessing? In the basement, they find boxes labeled with years, the way people do when they want the past to stay organized and quiet. Christmas decorations. Old tools. Photographs. A stack of employment paperwork from a factory job long gone. Everything looks harmless until you realize harmlessness is how predators survive. A detective opens a showbox and finds a bundle of letters tied with string. They are not love letters. They are not addressed. They look like notes, fragments, scribbles, names, times, numbers. A list of things someone wanted to remember, or wanted to track. The detective reads them and feels the case breathe against their skin. But then, nothing definitive. No missing person trophy sitting on a shelf. No single object that makes the room freeze. No undeniable piece of her life preserved in his. The team keeps searching anyway, because criminals are not idiots, and time is a skilled accomplice. People move. They renovate. They throw away. They burn. They bury. They replace. 25 years is a long time to scrub a conscience clean. In the garage, there's a toolbox that looks newer than the rest, and the detective's instincts prick. They open it. Inside, gloves, duct tape, rope. It's the kind of discovery that makes your pulse jump, and then immediately sinks into frustration because those items aren't illegal. They are common. They are plausible. They are the perfect cover for someone who understands how normal life can mask abnormal intentions. The detective hates how easy it is to own the tools of a crime without committing one, hates how the law requires a tightrope between suspicion and proof. They collect samples anyway. The rope fibers. The tape edges. Dust from the toolbox seams where skin cells cling like tiny ghosts. They swab handles. They bag it. They label it. Because the new science doesn't just see blood. It sees touch. It sees presence. It sees the micro-traces of a person moving through a moment they can't erase. Outside, neighbors gather at a distance, pretending they're taking out trash, walking dogs, checking mail. They stare at the police cars and the evidence bags like they are watching a storm cloud settle over the block. Some whisper his name. Some shake their heads. Some look vindicated, finally, the creep gets what he deserves. Some look horrified, no, not him, not someone we waved to, not someone we saw at the hardware store. The detective knows both reactions are the same at their core, people trying to keep their world from feeling random. The man's family, if he has one, reacts like a trapped animal. A partner calls screaming. A brother shows up furious. Someone threatens the police with lawsuits, with media, with violence. Someone cries. Someone says you're ruining his life. The detective thinks, what about hers? What about the life that stopped in 2000 and never restarted? But the detective keeps that thought locked behind the teeth. Rage isn't evidence. It's fuel, and fuel has to be controlled. They bring him in for another interview, but they don't call it an interrogation. Words matter. He sits in the same fluorescent room that has held 1,000 lies. He tries to sit casually, legs stretched, arms crossed, but his knee bounces. He asks for water. He doesn't drink it. He asks why they are doing this now, after all these years, like time itself should grant immunity. The detective slides a photo across the table, not of the victim, not yet, just a printout of the genealogy tree, simplified, anonymized, a clean diagram that still looks like a noose. The detective says, "We've got DNA." They watch his face. There's a tiny tightening around the eyes. It's gone in a second. But the detective catches it, the way you catch a flash of movement in the corner of your vision and you know something is alive there. He says he doesn't know what they're talking about. He says he never touched her. He says he barely knew her. His voice is steady, but it's steady like ice, too controlled, too flat. The detective brings up the overlaps, the workplace proximity, the schedule, the routes. The detective mentions names from the family tree, relatives in the area in 2000. The man's mouth twitches, not quite a smile, not quite a grimace. He says, "You're reaching." And maybe they are. The detective knows the danger of tunnel vision. Cold cases can become obsessions, and obsessions can become traps. But the DNA doesn't reach. The DNA points. Even when it's partial. Even when it's complex. It points the way a compass points even in fog. They push harder. They mention the tip that felt precise. They mention the old witness who remembered a car. They mention the diary line about being watched. The man's eyes flicker down for a fraction of a second, down, not away, like he's checking something inside himself. The detective has seen it before. It's not guilt. It's calculation. He asks for a lawyer. The room shifts instantly. The detective stops. They have to. Rights are rights. The interview ends with a chair scrape and a silence that feels almost triumphant on his side of the table. He thinks he's done what smart people do. He thinks the law will protect him. He's not entirely wrong. Now everything depends on the lab. The lab is a different kind of suspense, the kind that stretches and thins until you can almost hear it snapping. The detective calls for updates and gets the same response, still processing, still comparing, still extracting. Evidence doesn't move at the speed of fear. It moves at the speed of protocol. The detective understands the reasons, chain of custody, contamination prevention, peer verification, but understanding doesn't soothe the ache. Because outside the lab, life keeps happening. Suspects sleep. Families go to work. People who might have answers keep breathing. Days later, results arrive in pieces, like a story told through torn pages. A fiber analysis that suggests nothing. A swab that returns a mixture too complex to separate cleanly. A trace DNA hit that doesn't match any offender database. A partial profile that reinforces the genealogical line but still doesn't slap a name onto the table the way everyone wants. The detective stares at the reports and feels the case hovering at the edge of certainty like a plane circling an airport that won't clear it to land. They pivot again, because cold cases are built on pivots. They go after the relatives more aggressively now, voluntary samples, court orders where possible, surveillance where necessary. They find one cousin who left Wisconsin years ago and is now living under a calm suburban routine in another state. The detective knocks on a door in a neighborhood full of trimmed lawns and bright holiday lights, and the contrast is obscene. The cousin answers, smiling at first, then freezing when the detective says the victim's name. People always freeze at the name. Even innocent people. The name carries weight. The cousin says they didn't know her. The cousin says they were in a different place in 2000. The cousin's partner hovers behind them, eyes wide, like suddenly their life has been invaded by a ghost. They ask for DNA. The cousin hesitates, then agrees, because refusal looks like guilt in a world that doesn't understand nuance. The swab scrapes the inside of the cheek. It's over in seconds. The cousin tries to laugh it off, but the laugh doesn't land. Because now the cousin knows what the detective knows: your body can betray you even when your mouth doesn't. Back in Racine, the rumor mill is a wildfire. People talk about DNA from the future. They talk about family tree police. They talk about a suspect being one of them. The community splits again, those who believe the new methods are salvation, and those who fear them like a surveillance state creeping into their lives. And underneath the debate is a simpler emotion: dread. Because if this can happen to him, it can happen to anyone, and if anyone can be tied to a violent act through family, then nobody is as separate from darkness as they thought. The family of the missing woman hears about the search, hears about the DNA, hears about the investigation tightening, and hope arrives like a dangerous drug. It lights them up. It makes them restless. It makes them angry at time itself. They want an arrest. They want a body. They want a confession. They want the relief of a period at the end of a sentence that has been running for decades. They sit in their living room with the same photo on the wall, the same smile frozen in the frame, and they imagine a courtroom for the 1000th time, the moment the truth finally stands up and says itself out loud. But the detective can't promise anything. Promises get people killed in court. Promises make juries suspicious. Promises make defense attorneys smile. The detective tells them, "We're working. We're close." Close is a word that tastes like metal. Close can still mean years. Close can still mean never. The cousin's DNA comes back. Not a match. Not the match. But it strengthens the tree again, narrows another branch, tightens the funnel. It points back toward the same cluster of men, the same bloodline, the same geography. The detective pins another note to the board. The board is crowded now with faces and lines and dates, a spiderweb of human connections that looks like a trap. The detective steps back and stares until the eyes blur, because sometimes you have to stop looking at details to see the pattern. And the pattern is ugly. The pattern suggests someone in that family line had access and opportunity and enough presence in her orbit to leave DNA behind. The pattern suggests someone who could have approached her without setting off alarms. The pattern suggests someone who knew how to disappear evidence across time. The pattern suggests the kind of predator who survives by being forgettable. The detective drives past the place where she was last known to be, lets the car idle, listens to the city. Racine at night has its own sound, the distant rush of the lake wind, a train horn that seems to come from nowhere, the occasional bark of a dog. It's the sound of ordinary life continuing around an extraordinary absence. The detective thinks about the night she vanished, about the quiet, about the porch light flickering like a nervous pulse, and wonders if the person who did it ever drives this street too, ever looks at these houses and feels nothing, ever passes the same corner and remembers exactly what happened down to the second. Because that's the thing about unresolved violence, it's asymmetrical. The family lives with it every day. The community carries it like a scar. The detective carries it like a weight in the chest. And the person responsible, if still alive, might carry it like a private trophy, or might have convinced themselves it never mattered, that she was just a moment, just an object, just a name that fades in time. The case isn't solved yet. Not in the way the world wants. Not with handcuffs and headlines and a verdict that makes people sleep easier. It's warmer, yes, it's moving, yes, it's closer than it has ever been, but close is not done. The truth is still behind glass. The DNA is still a voice without a face. The suspects are still shadows wearing ordinary clothes. And out there, in the same city where the lake wind keeps scraping at the streets, someone knows something. Someone has always known something. They've held it for years like a stone in the pocket, telling themselves it's not their responsibility, telling themselves the past is the past, telling themselves silence is safer. But silence doesn't stay quiet forever. It ferments. It grows teeth. The detective looks at the board again, at the narrowed tree, at the tight cluster, at the one branch that keeps glowing. The detective knows they are chasing a ghost that bleeds. The detective knows the next step could be the breakthrough or the collapse. And as the station lights dim and the city outside settles into another night of locked doors and half-slept fear, the case keeps breathing, slow and steady, like something alive under ice, waiting for the moment it finally breaks through, or the moment it pulls everyone under with it. The first crack in a long silence never sounds like thunder. It sounds like paperwork, like a lab email sent at 2:14 a.m., like a phone vibrating on a desk in a room that smells of stale coffee and old case files. The detective stares at the subject line and feels the air thicken. DNA mixture reanalysis, updated interpretation. Not a confession. Not a name. Just 4 words that can either resurrect a case or bury it deeper. They open it anyway, because fear doesn't stop the job. It just rides shotgun. The report reads like a machine speaking in riddles, but the meaning is human and brutal. The mixture is clearer now. The technology separated what used to be tangled. Her profile is there, steady, undeniable. And the second contributor, still partial, still stubborn, has sharpened. Not enough to show the world. Enough to point the detectives like a compass needle snapping toward north. The likelihood ratios tighten. The probability shifts. The science is doing what time refused to do, it's making the past measurable. They run it again through every database they can. CODIS gives them nothing, that old blank stare. But the genealogy work, the family tree that has been narrowing like a funnel, suddenly behaves differently. The numbers don't just say, related. They say close. Closer than before. The distance between the unknown contributor and the cluster they've been watching collapses like a lung punctured. The genealogist calls and doesn't waste words. We're down to a small set now, they say. Small set? The phrase is the closest thing to mercy this case has offered. The detective spreads the candidate list across the table and feels the familiar sickness return, the knowledge that one of these ordinary faces could be the reason a family has spent decades living with a permanent ache. Names. Birth dates. Old addresses. Employment overlaps. The detective circles one, then another, then stops. Because one name has a pattern around it, a pattern that hums. A man who lived too close. Worked too close. Moved at the wrong time. The kind of life that looks normal until you hold it up to the disappearance like a photograph against a light and the dark shapes show through. They pull his history again. They pull it harder. Not just arrests, but calls for service. Not just convictions, but allegations. Domestic disturbances filed and forgotten. Arguments loud enough for neighbors to call, quiet enough to never make headlines. A restraining order that never turned into a criminal case because the victim didn't show up, because fear is expensive, because systems are exhausting. A job transfer right after the year 2000, framed as opportunity, timed like escape. Every detail alone is explainable. Together, they start to form a silhouette. The detective goes back to old interviews and rereads them with new eyes. The coworker who said he used to hang around after shift. The friend who said she felt watched. The neighbor who remembered a car idling too long. The tip that was precise, too precise to be a coincidence. The notes in the showbox found during the search, the strange fragments that looked like tracking, like someone cataloging something that shouldn't be cataloged. It all begins to pull into alignment, and alignment is dangerous, because alignment can mean truth, or it can mean you're finally building a story you want so badly that you forget to test it. So they test it. They pull his location in 2000 with the tools that didn't exist then. Old utility records. Old lease agreements. Work schedules kept on microfilm. Pay stubs. Shift logs. The detective learns where he was, not just in broad strokes, but in the granular way guilt hates. The detective maps his days like a hunter mapping tracks in snow. He had access. He had time windows. He had proximity. And he had something worse, a reason to be near her that didn't look suspicious, because they shared a world. They decide to get his DNA the clean way this time. Not trash pulls. Not relatives. Not approximations. The kind of sample that holds up under courtroom light. That means either consent or a court order. Consent is unlikely. Court orders require probable cause sharp enough to cut through a judge's skepticism. The detective writes another affidavit, words stacked like bricks. They include the genealogy narrowing, the overlap, the updated mixture interpretation, the behavioral indicators, the inconsistencies that now look like camouflage. They strip emotion out of it, because emotion is easy to dismiss, but the cold logic of science and timeline is harder to argue with. The judge signs. The paper becomes permission. Permission becomes momentum. They bring him in under the guise of a follow-up. He shows up annoyed, confident, older now, with that practiced expression of a man who believes time makes him untouchable. He sits down like he owns the chair. He tries to talk about how busy he is, how ridiculous this is, how he's been through this before. His voice has that casual contempt people use when they think the past can't bite anymore. The detective doesn't argue. Arguing gives him energy. The detective asks small questions. Unimportant questions. Questions designed to let him talk. People always think talking is power. They don't realize it's rope. What do you remember about her? The detective asks, soft. He shrugs. Not much. She was around. Same place, that's it. Did you ever give her a ride? No. Ever talk outside work? Maybe once. In passing. The detective lets the silence stretch after each answer, because silence is the space where people panic and try to fill the gap. He fills the gap with defensiveness. He says the police are wasting his time. He says the family should move on. That sentence lands in the room like a slap. Move on. As if grief has a switch. As if a woman can be erased and everyone should just accept it because it's inconvenient. The detective slides the court order across the table. We need a DNA sample, they say, flat. His face changes. It's subtle, almost invisible, but it's there, an instant recalculation, a flicker of something that isn't anger. He tries to laugh. DNA? For what? The detective leans forward just slightly. For the truth. He sits back. He calls it harassment. He calls it a witch hunt. He says he wants a lawyer. But the order is the order. The nurse comes in. The swab is taken. The sample is sealed. Chain of custody begins its clean, merciless march. The man's eyes never leave the evidence bag as it leaves the room. The detective watches him watch it and thinks, a person who is innocent doesn't stare at a swab like it's a loaded gun. The sample goes to the lab like a message in a bottle thrown into a storm. The detective returns to the office and waits in the only way detectives know how, by working. They revisit the car evidence. They revisit the house evidence. They revisit the places searched long ago. They ask the lab to retest items that were considered useless in 2000, because sometimes the smallest overlooked thing is the one that finally screams. A strip of tape. A seam on fabric. A tiny flake trapped under a fingernail that was never processed because resources were thin and methods were blunt. They also pull his digital footprint, because the modern world keeps receipts. Not just his phone now, but what he did years ago online. Old accounts. Old usernames. The detective finds a forum post from the early 2000s, nothing criminal, just a tone, a fixation, a way of talking about women that feels like ownership. They find photographs, his smiling face at family events, his arm around people who trusted him. They find the carefully curated version of a man who has been living as if nothing is coming. And the whole time, the family waits, and waiting is its own kind of torture. The mother answers every unknown call. The father sleeps lightly, as if the phone might ring and deliver a miracle at 3 a.m. The siblings carry anger like a second spine, because hope has been offered too many times and snatched away. They don't want optimism anymore. They want an ending. They want to stop living in a sentence without punctuation. The lab calls on a Tuesday. Tuesday is a cruel day for life-changing news because it's ordinary. No drama. No thunder. Just a weekday that will split time into before and after. Detective, the analyst says, voice careful. We have a result. The detective stands up without meaning to. Talk to me. It's consistent, the analyst says, and that word, consistent, hits like a wave. The sample you provided matches the unknown contributor profile from the evidence item. Matches. The word doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with a cold settling in the chest. Because a match is not just a victory. It's a door opening onto a room you've been afraid to enter. The detective asks for the numbers. They ask for the certainty. They ask for the statistical weight. The analyst provides it, professional, precise. The probability of a random individual matching is astronomically low. The mixture interpretation now supports inclusion. The unknown contributor is no longer unknown. The science has reached across decades and grabbed a person by the collar. The detective hangs up and sits very still, because the mind has to catch up to what the body already knows. This is it. This is the closest thing to truth they've had since the night she vanished. And now comes the next problem, turning scientific truth into legal truth, turning a lab report into handcuffs, turning a case file into a courtroom story that 12 strangers will believe beyond a reasonable doubt. They move fast, but they move smart. An arrest without preparation can collapse. A premature headline can poison a jury. They coordinate with the prosecutor. They build the narrative, not as a dramatic tale, but as a chain. Chain of evidence. Chain of events. Chain of opportunity. They rehearse the questions the defense will ask: contamination, mixture ambiguity, lab error, genealogy ethics, why now, why him? They prepare answers made of facts and careful language. The detective knows the defense doesn't need to prove innocence, they just need to inject doubt. Doubt is a parasite. It eats cases from the inside. They also know suspects don't sit still when they sense the net tightening. The man has already lawyered up. He's already told people he's being targeted. He's already begun laying the groundwork for being the victim in his own story. The detective checks his movements. He's still going to work. Still buying groceries. Still living. But there's a new edge in his routine, extra glances in mirrors, longer pauses at stop signs, the behavior of someone who feels watched and hates the feeling because it reminds him of the power he once had over someone else. The arrest happens in a way that looks boring from the outside. No chase. No spotlight. A traffic stop. A parking lot. A moment where he's pulled from his ordinary life and confronted by the machinery of consequences. He protests loudly. He demands explanations he already knows. He tries to turn it into theater because theater is how guilty people protect themselves. They build noise to drown out the fact that the evidence is quiet and sure. When the cuffs click, the sound travels farther than metal. It travels through the community. Through the family's home. Through the decades of maybe, and we don't know, and no leads. It hits like a shockwave. People in Racine hear his name and feel their stomachs drop. Some feel relief. Some feel nausea. Some feel both at once, because relief doesn't erase the horror, it just changes its shape. The family is called. The detective's voice on the phone is different this time. The mother knows before the words even arrive. You can hear it in the breath. In the pause. In the way the detective says her name first, gentle, like handling glass. We made an arrest, the detective says. The mother makes a sound that isn't a cry and isn't a laugh. It's the sound of a heart trying to do two opposite things at once, break and heal. The father asks, is it real? Because after decades, reality feels like a trick. The detective says, yes, and the word lands heavy. Not because it solves everything. because it changes everything. But the case is still not finished, because an arrest is not a confession, and DNA is not a story by itself. The prosecutor needs motive, needs context, needs a sequence that makes sense to jurors who have never felt this kind of long, dragging fear. The defense will say it's incidental contact, workplace contamination, shared spaces. They will say DNA doesn't prove a crime, only a touch. They will say the state is guessing the rest. So the detectives hunt for the rest like bloodhounds. They re-interview co-workers from 2000, now older, now softer, now more willing to talk because time has loosened loyalties. One says he had a temper. Another says he fixated on her. Another says she once asked to be walked to her car. Someone remembers an argument in the parking lot. Someone remembers her face that day, tight, controlled, the way people look when they're trying not to show fear at work because fear is humiliating. The memories are imperfect, but they stack. They become shape. They become corroboration. They search again for anything that links him physically to her beyond DNA. Old receipts. Old gas station records. Old pager logs. It's messy, because the year 2000 didn't leave the digital trail 2026 does. But they find small things. An old note in a supervisor's file about workplace conduct. A complaint that was never escalated. A witness who now admits they saw his car near her street the night she vanished but didn't speak up because they didn't want trouble, because they didn't want to be involved, because silence felt safer. Silence always feels safer, until it becomes the weapon. And in the middle of all that, the case keeps its darkest secret: the missing woman is still missing. The arrest gives the community a headline. It gives the family an enemy with a name. But it doesn't give them what they wanted most. It doesn't give them the place where she rests. It doesn't give them the final truth of what happened after she disappeared into that edited silence. It doesn't give them the chance to bring her home. The man sits in a cell now, and the walls around him are plain and hard, and still he denies. He claims he's being framed by science he doesn't understand. He claims the police are desperate. He claims coincidence. But his eyes in the interview room look different. The confidence has hairline fractures. The detective watches him and thinks, you can survive a long time in a lie, but you can't survive forever once the lie has to share space with proof. Outside, Racine breathes differently. People speak her name without whispering now, not because the pain is gone, but because it has direction. There is a suspect. There is a case moving toward court. There is the possibility of a verdict. And yet, at night, the lake wind still scrapes the streets, and doors still lock, and parents still watch their children cross the driveway, because the story isn't over until the last question stops bleeding into every quiet moment. And the question is still there, loud under everything: if he did it, where is she? Where did the night take her? Where did he put the truth? Because an arrest can feel like an ending, but for the family, for the city, for everyone who has carried this cold case like a scar, it's only the moment the silence finally breaks, revealing, underneath, that the hardest part isn't catching the monster. It's forcing him to speak. The moment the cuffs click, the city doesn't exhale, Racine holds its breath harder, because an arrest is a headline, not a healing, and the space between, we got him, and, we know everything, is where nightmares like to live. The suspect sits behind glass now, fluorescent light flattening his face, and still the case feels unfinished, because her name is still attached to one word that burns hotter than any accusation: missing. No gravesite. No goodbye. No place for the family to put their hands and say, here is where you are, here is where the waiting can finally stop. The detective knows what prosecutors know, what families learn the hard way: DNA can put a person near a moment, but it can't tell you where the body went, and in the court of public grief, the body is the final proof the world understands. So the investigation doesn't slow after the arrest, it accelerates, it becomes something else: less hunt, more excavation, like they are digging through 25 years of lies with bare hands. The suspect's home is searched again, deeper now, with a new hunger and new resources. They bring in cadaver dogs, not one, several, because dogs aren't fooled by decor or fresh paint. The dogs move through rooms that look normal to humans and dangerous to instincts, noses hovering over floorboards, closets, vents, the seams of everyday life. The dogs alert once near a corner of the basement, then again near an exterior slab in the backyard, and every time a dog sits or stiffens, the air in the room changes, the way it changes when a door opens to a room you didn't know existed. The suspect's attorney calls it junk science. Dogs can be wrong. Odors can linger. Soil can shift. Maybe there was an old animal burial. Maybe a previous tenant. Maybe contamination. The detective hears the excuses already forming like a wall and keeps moving anyway, because excuses don't erase a dog's certainty, they just delay the moment you have to look under the concrete. They bring in ground-penetrating radar, the kind of machine that turns Earth into a grayscale confession. The screen shows irregularities, lines and voids that might be nothing, might be everything. The technician points, cautious, careful not to inject drama into data, but the detective sees the shapes and thinks of the most brutal truth: the ground doesn't forget. People bury secrets because they believe dirt is loyal. Dirt is loyal to no one. Dirt keeps records in the quietest language there is. A warrant for excavation follows, because you can't just break a yard apart on instinct. Judges want more than intuition. They want alerts, readings, corroboration, logic stacked tight. The detective writes again, their words now carrying the weight of a community watching. The warrant is granted. The backyard becomes a scene, taped off, illuminated by portable lights that make the dark look clinical. Neighbors gather again, drawn to the spectacle like moths to a flame, and the flame this time is the possibility that the earth might finally give her back. The first shovel into soil always feels obscene, like you're violating something sacred, but the detective has learned that sacredness doesn't protect anyone. They dig slow, layer by layer, sifting dirt through screens, looking for bone, cloth, jewelry, a zipper, anything that shouldn't be there. Hours pass. Dirt piles grow. The suspect sits in a cell and pretends not to care. His lawyer speaks loudly about due process. The family waits by a phone that never leaves their hands. And in the yard, the earth resists in the way it always resists, silent, heavy, stubborn. They find something small at first, something that makes everyone freeze and lean in. A fragment of fabric, old, degraded, the color of it changed by years underground. The forensic tech lifts it with tweezers like lifting a moth wing. It could be anything. It could be nothing. It goes into a bag anyway. Then another item, metal, rusted, bent, the outline of a clasp. The kind of object that might have been part of a purse, a belt, a piece of clothing. The detective doesn't let hope explode yet. Hope has betrayed them before. But the heart, even after decades, still tries. They dig deeper. The night grows colder. Breath becomes visible. The floodlights turn the yard into a harsh island of truth surrounded by ordinary darkness. The workers hit something solid, concrete. A slab. Not unusual in a backyard. But the edges are wrong, the seam lines too clean, the pore pattern inconsistent with the rest of the property. Someone put this here, maybe, after the fact. Someone who wanted the ground sealed. Someone who understood that concrete is not just building material, it's a promise of silence. They chip at it. The sound of concrete breaking is sharp, violent, echoing down the street. Neighbors flinch at the noise. The detective flinches too, because every strike is a question, what are we about to uncover? Beneath the slab, the soil is different. Darker. Compacted. The technician calls it disturbed. The word lands like a verdict. Disturbed soil means history moved here. Disturbed soil means someone did work in the dark. They dig into the disturbed patch, and then the dogs begin to react again, insistent now, restless. The family's phone rings once, and their bodies jolt, and then it's just a wrong number, a cruel coincidence that makes the mother cry with a sound that isn't grief or anger but exhaustion. The detective hears about it later and feels a surge of rage at the randomness of the world, at how even the smallest things can be used as torture. The excavation yields more fragments. Nothing whole. Nothing undeniable. No skull. No long bones. No clear human remains. The detectives trade glances that look like frustration and fear. Because sometimes killers don't bury where they live. Sometimes they scatter. Sometimes they move what they buried. Sometimes they use water. Sometimes they use industry. The backyard may be a decoy or a leftover, a place where something happened briefly but not finally. The evidence goes to the lab. The lab will tell them whether the fabric fibers match anything known, whether the metal has trace residues, whether the soil contains biological material. They pack it all up and the yard is left half open, a wound in the ground that the city can't stop staring at. In the station, prosecutors begin building their case like engineers. Every piece must connect. Every claim must be backed. The DNA match is powerful, but the defense will attack it from every angle: mixture, interpretation, transfer, contamination, coincidence. They will point to the years between 2000 and now and say memory is unreliable. They will point to the lack of a body and suggest the state is selling a story without an ending. They will try to turn uncertainty into reasonable doubt, because reasonable doubt is the only door a guilty person needs. The prosecutor meets with the detective in a room with no windows and says it plainly: we need more. Not because they don't believe. Because court requires something belief alone can't provide. The detective nods. They already know. The case needs motive, pattern, corroboration, the kind of surrounding detail that makes jurors feel the truth in their bones. So the detective returns to old witnesses again, because witnesses are like evidence: some degrade, but some grow stronger with time. People who were afraid to speak in 2000 are older now, less concerned with being liked, less worried about retaliation, more haunted by what silence has done. A former co-worker sits in an interview chair and stares at the table for a long time before speaking. He was fixated, she says finally. The word feels too soft, too polite, for what she means. She describes him lingering near the victim's work area, always finding reasons to be close, always watching. She says the victim once mentioned feeling uncomfortable, once joked about needing a bodyguard, but the joke didn't land. She says there was a day when the suspect snapped at the victim over something trivial, a moment of anger that made the whole room quiet. She says afterward the victim seemed shaken, and she, the co-worker, did nothing because doing something felt like making trouble, and trouble is something people avoid until trouble arrives anyway and takes everything. Another witness remembers a car. The witness is older now, voice rougher, eyes tired. He says he saw the suspect's vehicle near the victim's street that night. He didn't call because he wasn't sure. He didn't call because he didn't want police in his business. He didn't call because it was late and he wanted to sleep. He says it now with shame. The detective hears shame and files it next to something important: people who are lying rarely sound ashamed. They sound defensive. Shame has its own texture. They subpoena old employment records again. They find that the suspect had an unreported absence the day after the disappearance, a sick day that didn't fit his pattern, a gap that once seemed meaningless but now looks like time used for something. They check his phone records, limited, but there are hints. They check whether he had access to certain industrial areas through work, whether he knew back roads, whether he had keys to warehouses, whether he could move unseen in places where machinery noise covers other sounds. The investigation begins to feel like reconstructing a crime with only the shadow of the crime left behind. In jail, the suspect learns what all suspects learn: the walls listen, and the other inmates are not friends. He's placed in a pod where stories circulate like currency. He denies loudly at first, the performance of innocence. But denial doesn't play well inside. Inside, men measure each other differently. They measure your fear. They measure your posture. They measure how you react when someone says the victim's name. The suspect starts keeping to himself. He makes fewer jokes. His eyes dart more. And then, the jailhouse informant appears, like they always do, like a predictable stain on the justice system. An inmate claims the suspect talked. Claimed he didn't mean for it to happen. Claimed she fought. Claimed he panicked. The informant says the suspect hinted at a location, near water, near an old industrial lot, near a place with rusted fencing and weeds. The prosecutor's face hardens when they hear it, because informants are messy. Informants lie for deals. Informants invent. But sometimes informants also hear things guilty people can't stop themselves from saying, because guilt is pressure, and pressure escapes through cracks. The detective approaches it like a surgeon, careful, skeptical, methodical. They verify the informant's background. They check what the informant could have known from news. They check whether the details are public or private. And one detail, the kind no reporter would have, no outsider would guess, matches something from the file. A phrase used by the victim. An item she carried. A location that was searched early but not thoroughly. The detective feels the cold case shift again, like a locked door just moved under pressure. They deploy search teams to the area described. It's winter, the ground hard, the air sharp. The industrial edge of Racine is a different world, long stretches of fencing, abandoned lots, warehouses that hum with emptiness, puddles rimmed with ice. The lake wind threads through broken windows and makes everything sound haunted. Dogs search again. Officers walk lines, eyes scanning for depressions, disturbed earth, remnants. They find nothing at first. Nothing but debris. Then a dog alerts near a drainage culvert, a place where water collects and carries things away. The culvert is dark, a throat under the road. They crawl in with lights. The smell is damp and sour. The walls are slimy. The detective feels the claustrophobic press of concrete and thinks, if this is where she went, it is the cruelest kind of hiding place. They recover items. Not a body. Items. A piece of clothing fabric snagged on metal. A small personal object, half buried in muck, like it tried to stay above the water and failed. The object is bagged. The lab will tell them if it belongs to her. The family is informed cautiously, because cautious is the only way you can speak when hope can kill. The trial date looms. Media returns like vultures, circling for a story with an arc, cold case breakthrough, they say. DNA solves mystery, they say. The city watches its own trauma become content. The family is asked to smile for cameras or cry on command, and every time they speak, it costs them something. The prosecutor tells them, we're close, and close is still a word that tastes like metal, because close doesn't bring her home, close doesn't fill the empty chair. Then the lab result arrives on one of the recovered items. The analyst's voice is careful again, but there's a shift, a gravity. The DNA on the item is consistent with the victim. It is her. Not a theory. Not a rumor. Her biological signature, surviving in the cold, in the damp, in a place no one should ever be found. The family hears and collapses in different ways. The mother sobs with relief and horror tangled together. The father goes silent, the kind of silence that is louder than screaming. Because finding her DNA is not finding her, but it is proof she touched that place, proof the story is real, proof the monster didn't just exist in imagination. The suspect is confronted again, this time with new evidence, the location, the item, the lab confirmation. He listens with a face that tries to be bored. He says nothing. His lawyer speaks. The detective watches his jaw tighten at the mention of the culvert, watches his eyes flick for a heartbeat to the side, like he's picturing something. The detective thinks, you remember. You remember exactly. But he still doesn't confess. Confession would mean surrendering control, and control is what men like this worship. He chooses silence again, because silence has protected him for decades. He bets on silence surviving a jury. Outside, the lake wind keeps scraping the streets. The city keeps living, but it lives with a new kind of tension now, because the story has teeth and a face and a courtroom date. People argue about guilt in diners and online comment threads. Some demand the death penalty. Some demand restraint. Some say, innocent until proven. Some say, we've waited long enough. And through it all, the family lives in a state between terror and anticipation, because they are finally close to a verdict, but they are also finally close to hearing, in detail, what might have happened to her, details they have begged for and feared for in equal measure. The detective stands at their desk late at night, the case file open again, the board filled with lines now tightened into a near-closed circle, and they understand something that never makes it into headlines. Solving a cold case doesn't bring the past back. It drags the past into the present and forces everyone to breathe it again. It makes the city relive the night, makes the family relive every hour of waiting, makes witnesses relive every moment they chose silence. And it makes the suspect, finally, sit with the weight of a truth he thought time had buried. But the hardest question is still on the table, bleeding into every quiet moment. If her DNA is there, if the suspect is here, if the evidence is speaking now, where is the rest of her story? Where is the final piece? Where is the place that turns missing into found? Because until that last question stops echoing, Racine's breath stays trapped in its chest, and the cold case, no matter how close it is to court, still feels like a wound that refuses to close.